Dragon Boy and Heather. Oh, sorry, wait, wrong show. Hey folks, Master X here. Now it goes without saying, Akira Toriyama was a powerhouse back in the 80s. Back then, he was pumping up tons of ideas for new manga, and Kazuhiko Tsurushima, a powerhouse himself back in the 70s, could see this talent bubbling up to the fore. But the only problem for him though, was the fact that Toriyama was a bit of a scatterbrain. He had tons of ideas, but to Torishima, it just failed to see nearly all of them going the distance and getting into regular syndication. They were good, but they just wouldn't endure. They were either too basic, too short, or simply not his cup of tea. Him thinking that the readers won't be interested in that. However, without this particular entry, there might not have been a Dragon Ball. At all. Yes, there may have been more Dr. Slump, but Toriyama would be nowhere near as popular as he is right now around the world. You see, before Dragon Ball, there was Dovahkiin, Dragon Boy. After Dr. Slump, Toriyama's first big hit started in 1981, and before the premiere of Dragon Ball in November 1984, there was something else. Something to bridge the gap between the two, to incorporate the juvenile humour of Slump, and there's a lot of it, and what would go into the successor in 1984, that being Dragon Boy. This manga was pretty short-lived though. Dragon Boy ended up lasting only from August 1983 to that October. 2 months, and it consisted of only 2 chapters. But it's worth talking about, since it is basically a prototype of the series we know and love today. Toriyama talked about Dragon Boy rather fondly back in Daizenshuu 2 from 1995, when asked about what went into making Dragon Ball. Here's what he had to say. I just ended Dr. Slump, and for the time being, I was thinking about what I should do for my next serialized work. I had many meetings with my editor at the time, Torishima-san. As it happened, at that time, I loved Jackie Chan's movies and had seen Drunken Master dozens of times. Since I liked that sort of thing, Torishima-san advised me to try and make a kung fu shonen manga. So, I drew a one-shot called Dragon Boy. That got an incredibly positive response from the readers, so I decided to go that route for my next serialized work. However, there's a contradiction here, from 6 years earlier, from Toriyama himself. It turns out this manga's significance was bigger than we assumed. It had to do with the significance of Dragon Boy. According to a mini-manga, The Anime and Me, an insert of the Dragon Ball Z anime special from 1989, Toriyama states that it was because of Dragon Boy Dr. Slump ended. Thanks to Dayspring for their awesome find on the Kanzenshuu forums, here it's written in French, but here's the English translation, which is pivotal. While I was still drawing Dr. Slump, I would often watch Jackie Chan videos. Enthralled with these films, it often occurred that I would watch them numerous times while I worked. Some ideas started forming deep in my soul, and so I talked about them with my editor. I started to draw with spirit, and I finished by inventing a story with the title, dramatically enough, of Dragon Boy. I never imagined that Dragon Boy would be so popular once it debuted. I therefore decided to stop Dr. Slump so that I could turn around and start fresh, creating a manga about martial arts. Dragon Ball was born. With Dragon Boy, quite obviously given that it ended the juggernaut that was Slump, he had found a hook. Slump was making a lot of money, so Toriyama was taking a big risk here, based on 2 chapters. Dragon Boy, that had better work. But to be fair, it was something that filled him with confidence and the drive to make something more, something that really appealed to his martial arts love of movies and stuff like that. He had enough to spark what would then become Goku and Bulma. And what's even more, interesting, I guess, is that it manages to make those 2 chapters pretty raunchy, Toriyama style, mostly due to the old gag of the main hero living in seclusion from girls, reflecting Toriyama's shyness, and thus being unaware of their anatomy. Oh, that's gonna age well, of course. But you can clearly see the transition from Slump to Dragon Ball though in this tone. The first arc of the latter is very similar to this, only more fleshed out and toned down a little in terms of the toilet humour. Now, this is all well and good, but we didn't want to just simply state that Dragon Boy came before the show that we all know about. That would be too basic. There are other aspects of this manga that we'd like you to know about, as these are very crucial in understanding what started out with Goku and Bulma, and then evolved further into the later stage of the first Dragon Ball tome, and then into Z. Toriyama was a very nervous soul, unsure whether or not he'd be a one-and-done kind of manga artist with Slump. Yeah, he had made a ton of money from Slump, but he was still young. He was in his 20s. He needed more. Something to cure his itch of wanting to toy with action and comedy, as well as express his passion for movies and whatnot. Dragon Boy was just the beginning. So, let's start from the beginning. In the mystic land named Sen, there is a young man who has dedicated his name to training. His name was Tangtong, or Tanton in some fan translations, and not to be confused with one of TFS's classic Nuzlocke characters, Tantor. Tangtong, right from the get-go, is like what you would get if you crossed Yamcha and Goku together, with that being the result. Mimicking the hairdo of Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee from around the early 80s and late 70s. Tangtong was Toriyama's facsimile for all of those flicks, like we mentioned in the earlier quote. Again, you can see that his design indeed went on to inspire Goku, Gohan and Yamcha. Even the gi is similar to Piccolo's gi, and that was a whole 4 years before Piccolo Jr. even debuted. It's like with the aesthetic of King Piccolo. Years before Namekians were a thing, he had basically come up, Toriyama, with their type of home and feel without even realising it. It actually seems to be a Toriyama trope of his when you think about it, coming up with things on the hoof, then forgetting about them, and then recalling them, and reusing them wholesale, wantonly in fact. Dragon Ball Online is a good example. It's a goldmine of this kind of information, and you can see that to this day, that 2009 game, where he helped come up with the lore and tone, keeps on giving. It's the ultimate gift to himself. Even if the game didn't take off that much and wasn't popular across the world, the story endures. But let's get back to Tangtong. Tangtong lives with his nameless master, who one day gives him an important mission. He has to escort the princess of the Flower Country back to her homeland. This is a very significant job for Tangtong to do. It's a test from his master to see whether he is worthy of potentially further training, whether he has enough discipline to enact this diplomatic mission. Like what Roshi does with his teachings of discipline, this princess is critical in developing our hero. 2 years ago, she had run away from the Flower Country during a great war that had befallen it. She escaped to safety, but apparently, peace has returned, and she can seemingly go home, but she does need someone to guide her back to the homeland, and Tangtong is going to be that kind of guy. Granted, while his master is not exactly a Roshi type of guy, being somebody who appears to be much more serious, like your average learned master of martial arts, the princess has something in common with Bulma in terms of personality, being quite forward, despite, her appearance. But also at the same time, she is much more of a damsel in distress type of figure, like a typical princess, not having Bulma's smarts and abilities. Clearly, Toriyama hadn't come up with that part yet for Bulma. This is your standard cookie-cutter princess in the end, in need of rescue or protection. Only with Toriyama at the helm, so expect poop jokes. Tangtong is also given a Dragon Ball by his master. Wait, what? Wait. They're not completely identical to the ones that you're thinking of. In this world, they work slightly different. You'll soon find out how different, so watch until the end. The duo are then gifted a hovercraft by the master, and the princess wants to drive it, but she quickly regrets it, and asks Tangtong to take the wheel. Yeah, she's definitely not our Bulma. Our Bulma would have been an expert at piloting this kind of stuff. Along the way, on the way back to the Flower Country, we have classic Toriyama boy-girl nonsense, so we're going to skip to the part where the two of them get to a temple to get some water for the princess, because she's thirsty. In there, they got attacked by a water demon, because of course there's a water demon. The demon is quite a formidable enemy, so Tangtong tries to get help from his Dragon Ball. Now this is how they differ. Instead of granting wishes or you needing to collect 7 of them to make anything happen, you can summon actual dragons from a Dragon Ball to aid you in your quest, or to save you from a nasty predicament such as this. Fighting a water demon, Tangtong uses his ki on the orb, and a sickly little dragon appears. Yeah, turns out he isn't strong enough to use them properly. It won't be of much help. But yeah, this is actually classic Toriyama subversion in action. You think something big and cool is going to happen, but the exact opposite happens, to play on fan expectation. Toriyama was very good at that. Then, Tangtong reveals his secret. Turns out he doesn't need a dragon to help. He is part dragon. Kinda. He removes his shirt to reveal that he has dragon wings. That's right. Much like Goku's signature monkey tail, Tang Tong also has an animal-like body part. This is something that Toriyama brought forward too. The protagonist in Dragon Boy had wings, so I wanted a distinguishing characteristic in that sense, where you could tell it was him just by looking. So I gave Goku a tail. So even if he was hidden behind a rock, if you could still see his tail, you'd know that it was Goku. Again, Toriyama was probably aware of how Tang Tong could be called as derivative to your typical martial art kind of main character. But do these run-of-the-mill characters have wings? I think not. With that simple tweak, Dragon Boy stands out from most tomes. He is a literal Dragon Boy, not just a boy with a Dragon Ball. He uses his wings to escape from the demon and travel further, to the country called Haiyun. On the way, they meet a traveller, who claims that his name is Ping Yao. Already, you might be thinking that he looks like a younger version of Mercenary Tao, but he is not an assassin, nor is he somebody of quite ruthless nature. He's just your average guy. Or so you think. He tells our heroes that thieves stole his bags, and tricks the princess into giving him a rice ball. After that, he reveals his true form. He turns out to be a shape-shifting, cat-like yokai. Does he seem familiar? Well, Ping Yao seems to be an amalgamation of both Puar and Oolong, since his abilities have a time limit on them, but he is quite good at transfiguration like Puar. He tries to mess with the two even more, by turning into a rock. But seeing that Tang Tong is strong enough to break rocks with his bare fist quickly, that's not a smart thing to do, which prompts him to apologise, later on joining the team, where they get to a bridge guarded by some serious dangerous monstrosity that has been there for 100 years. In this scene, Ping Yao is Captain Exposition, taking some of the usual Krillin tropes aside by just standing at one point and then explaining the action and lore as it happens. Whilst Tang Tong here, he's doing the heavy lifting. Turns out that the monstrosity is a robot, and proves to be a pretty challenging opponent for our hero. As you can see, the design would later inspire various Pilaf mechs, as well as the pirate robot. And apparently, he was programmed a century ago by the soldiers from a castle on the other side of the bridge, to make sure that nobody else would ever pass and cross the bridge, ensuring their safety and solitude. But the problem with that is that the castle is already destroyed, and the robot still guards the bridge, providing obstacles for innocent travellers, who have no intent of further destroying the castle, which is practically a ruin at this point. Basically, the robot is a relic who performs a thankless and useless task. Kinda tragic, really. While Tang Tong fights valiantly, he cannot defeat the robot. As he has to showcase his wings during the fight, this prompts Ping Yao to intervene, seeing that the boy, just like him, isn't fully human. Apparently that means they're cool now. He shapeshifts into a soldier and relieves the machine from its duty by stating that the castle is gone and its directive is no longer valid. The robot accepts this order with relief and turns off, ending its long vigil. After that, the group continues their journey and more shenanigans happen. But in terms of the main plot, that's all that was released, really. It just kind of ends there. I guess you're supposed to assume that the princess is guided safely to her home, but thanks to that 1989 quote, you start to get the notion that Torishima and Toriyama struck gold with this, the first two chapters going down very well with the crowd, and immediately dropped tools, forgot about Dragon Boy, moving on to making Dragon Ball, with things that he had learnt from Tang Tong and reader feedback. Aww, it would have actually been nice if one day Toriyama, or even Toyotaro, finished the story. Maybe we'll make something. You can actually clearly see in this tome that the two characters that Toriyama cared about the most were Tang Tong and Ping Yao, as he never really bothered with naming the other characters. Yeah, Princess is indeed just called Princess here, and the Master just called Master. Also, while you can see some inspirations from Jackie Chan movies, Tang Tong doesn't really win any fights, at least not alone. Nor does he win with using his martial arts skills exclusively. He either has to retreat or has to rely on clever tricks. While he shares Goku's passion for fighting, he's not nearly as talented as the Saiyan was. He was just very lucky. As for the Dragon Balls, seeing the illustration of Tang Tong with the orbs feels kind of weird. We doubt that they were only meant as this one-time gag with the sickly dragon, and we think at some point they would end up being pretty useful. Like, maybe different Dragon Balls summon different dragons, or maybe it depends on how much ki and power that you use. Powerful warriors could summon powerful dragons, for instance. Tang Tong may have just been too young, and was only just beginning on his journey, and would naturally spawn baby dragons. Simple as. But still, we'll never find out what it would be. unless we chose to pay somebody to draw the manga and us write the story, giving it an ending. You like that, right? So how do we perceive Dragon Boy today? Well, in some ways it aged even worse than Roshi did, but it's an interesting example of what might have been, had Toriyama woke up in a different mood and decided to continue Tang Tong's journeys instead of Goku's, just relying on Dragon Boy's success alone, instead of adapting the story even further. There are, of course, more Dragon Ball prototypes, and if you want us to discuss them, just let us know in the comments. But what do you folks think? Do you like the premise of Dragon Boy? Are you sad that it never got a proper ending? Leave a comment below, and let's get this discussion going. And I will see you in the next video. Catch you later!